Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started because we are right at 9 o'clock. So my name is Mary Shepard, and I'm the director of the Southwest Colorado Small Business Development Center, and we are one of 15 SBDC centers in the state of Colorado, bringing no-cost consulting and low-cost trainings and workshops to businesses of Southwest Colorado. Today, we are offering our third part in a 6-part series on e-commerce. So we're really excited to have you joining us today. Here's our contact information. So please reach out to us going forward if you need any assistance from our team of consultants or would like to get on our mailing list to learn about more of our workshops and trainings. Can I go to the next slide? And I just want to quickly thank First Southwest Community Fund, who is sponsoring this series for us. They also, if you haven't already heard, are offering an opportunity to apply for up to $1,000 in scholarship grant to help you offset any of the costs of getting your e-commerce up and running. So whether that's helping, to pay for your site, to pay for some SEO work, or whatever it is that you would need to optimize your e-commerce business. Today we're going to talk about a really important topic, and I'm not going to talk for much longer because I want to turn it over right away to Sean. We're excited to have Sean Murray joining us from the Pikes Peak SBDC in Colorado Springs, where the director there, Ekta McCullier, is running our cyber program. So our SBDC Tech Source also has centers of excellence, and the Pikes Peak is our center for cybersecurity. So I'll turn it over to Sean Murray. He's going to give you his own bio, and I welcome you all today. So thanks for joining us today, Sean.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the introduction and the partnership. This is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen, and we will get started. I will ask, I believe I'm sharing the entire screen. I think you see our advertisement on your site right now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to be sharing out some additional resources as well outside of the slide presentation. To give you a better examples of some resources that you can use, your clients can use. Well, welcome everyone to this workshop. I'm excited to be here in a partnership between both SBDCs. Let me minimize this and we'll get going. So e-commerce series. So cybersecurity for your e-commerce website. Well, what does e-commerce website really look like? There's lots of different platforms, a lot of different things to consider. We're going to look at some of them. Then we're going to really do a deep dive into the various laws that we probably need to be looking at for compliance and some additional standards as well. All right, so again, this is a partnership between the Pikes Peak SBDC and the Southern Colorado, Southwest Colorado Small Business Development Center as well. The Cyber CYA program, Cover Your Assets, is what the Cyber CYA program is, run out of the Pikes Peak SBDC. I am the lead on the entire cyber program for the Pikes Peak SBDC, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. I'm not going to go through all of this, but SBDC Tech Source, lead cyber consultant, COVID-19 team member for the Pikes Peak SBDC. We also support, as you can see, the other SBDCs in the state and throughout the nation as well. I do have a background in the government and commercial sectors. We have our own company, and we are SBDC consultants providing services for our SBDC clients. I've worked with several federal agencies over the years to include NSA, FBI, CIA, Department of Defense, and Department of State on various cyber initiatives. I've got lots of experience and enjoy working with other consultants and our small businesses. I have a big passion for that. Last year, we actually traveled with our cadre up to Capitol Hill to advocate for different types of cybersecurity and resources that should be available at minimal to no cost for small businesses related to security. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So here's a workshop overview, today's agenda. Again, we're looking at e-commerce, sites and platforms and collaboration platforms. The workshop is going to focus on cybersecurity for your website. The website is the interface to those collaboration platforms or those e-commerce platforms. It'll review some secure platform options, and then help make sure that you understand whether or not you're meeting the information or cybersecurity requirements, depending on who your clientele is, right? So ensure that meeting GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, the EU law, if you're targeting European citizens or UK citizens, or other state and Colorado laws. We're going to do a deep dive into those laws. So we'll look at a basic introduction. We'll look at what is a secure platform, which ones are the most secure, levels in different levels of cybersecurity, what's needed for your site. How do you ensure that it's meeting GDPR, Colorado, and other state laws? We'll look at Colorado personal identifiable information data laws, and then what you need to know, especially as a Colorado proprietor. And then what can you do now? There's various tools to consider, and then questions that you can ask your website developer. And then we'll answer any questions at the end of this as well. So many businesses use websites and applications, so applications through websites to collect, process, transmit, or store information or data that qualifies as personal identifiable information. So you're not just selling your product, you're just not collaborating with other people to conduct your business. You're collecting information, you're collecting data. Some of that data or information you may think is benign, like cookies, tracking, analytics. In some laws articulate the proper method in which you can do that activity. Some laws require consent from the consumer. You may have seen pop-ups on various websites that say, hey, we collect information about you when you hit our website. Click here to accept the risk associated with whatever it is that we're collecting. All right, a lot of people just click through it without really understanding what the implications are or what it is that's being collected. As a proprietor that has a web presence, collects data or information, processes payments, no matter what the platform is, you need to understand what your requirements are. Is somebody else managing those requirements for you? We'll give you some questions to consider and go back and talk to your development team, whether it's an outsourced third party or somebody doing it on their own, or maybe you're developing and maintaining your own sites. All right, there's various laws that articulate what qualifies as personal identifiable information here in the United States. So it should be known that we don't have an overarching federal law like GDPR. We do have some industry-specific laws that address how we collect, process, transmit, and store electronic personal identifiable information. And not all information that's collected about someone is considered PII. But we do have industry-specific laws like HIPAA for the healthcare. FERPA relates to a law that was passed in 1974 related to personal identifiable information on students, so under the Department of Education. This qualifies for K through 12, public, private schools, colleges, universities. The criteria here is if you process, transmit, or store on a student under the age of 18 or over the age of 18 with no longer needing parental consent, that information needs to be protected. PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. This one probably will be very applicable to most of you if you're processing payments through your website, especially through a third-party provider. If you take payments inside of your organization, say maybe you have a store shop, you may be hiring a third-party provider to process your credit card and debit card payments. So Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard is a requirement. It's not a law, but it's mandated by the credit card industry. And if you don't comply with it, you can lose your ability to be able to process credit card payments. Privacy Act of 1974, this was a law that was passed the same year as FERPA. applies to the federal government, various government agencies that contract out maybe to a small business different means of processing, transmitting, and storing information or data that may qualify under the Privacy Act that need to be protected. These are just a few of the most common laws and standards that require protection of personal identifiable information. And so, you know, we're saying, well, why are we so concerned about personal identifiable information? Different laws articulate what qualifies as PII. And one of the purposes of this workshop today is to be able to better help you understand what those requirements are. Some laws have specific criteria as to what qualifies as PII, and then identify protection requirements, as well as reporting requirements if PII is breached or stolen. So this webinar will cover the basic requirements for appropriate identification and protection of customer data, as well as specific Colorado regulatory requirements when dealing with breaches not covered by federal law. The presenter will provide examples of breaches to help organizations identify business processes that may increase risk and recommended solutions to reduce them as well. All right, what kind of platforms are we talking about? So we have platforms that we can collaborate, like Zoom. After the pandemic started, it's kind of crazy right now. The scams that are coming out based on the technologies that we're using. We process payments through collaboration platforms like Zoom, like GoToMeeting, Shop Clues. That is an online shopping platform based out of India, based on a e-commerce platform software that we're going to take a look at using one of our tools. This was presented to the this specific site was presented to the Pikes Peak SBDC, and we did an analysis on the site itself, and we came up with lots of concerns that needed to be passed back to the people that were trying to sell off the platform that this organization had purchased. So you can purchase a platform, but you know, who's configuring it to make sure that it's secure for transmitting information and data. We'll take a look at some other platforms and how they collaborate. So you're probably familiar with Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, Amazon being the largest e-commerce site for taking payments. Sococo is an online collaboration platform used for web meetings and conferences. So a lot of organizations now are not doing live conferences. They're using platforms like Sococo and other systems to be able to collaborate and meet virtually. Some additional ones, these are all integrations with one single platform. So these are all integrated with Zoom. Zoom has the ability to integrate with each one of these platforms. Some of these platforms you may be very familiar with. You may be using Salesforce, for example, one of the largest sales platforms that are out there. So again, examples of automating your processes through your sites, through a platform that is now providing additional capabilities on behalf of your business that you may not be aware of what's on the back end, what's on the back side, how are they communicating, how are they passing data or information back and forth. All right, so the idea here is integrating technologies between various technologies. So pass-throughs, you as a proprietor need to understand what are these technologies, how do they communicate, how do they pass data, and more so than anything else, how do they protect that information or data? All right, so we talked about you know, some of the requirements. What levels of cybersecurity? Well, what's cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is nothing more than a rebranding of a very old term that's been around for hundreds of years, and that's referred to as information security. We call it cybersecurity now because 80% of most organizations' business processes are automated. So cybersecurity is nothing more than the rebranding of information security. We still include the protection of physical media, such as papers found on your printer, CDs, disk drives, anything that's written down that needs to be protected. So we talk about embedded systems. So what is embedded into your website? What does that mean, embedded? Well, we embed pictures. We embed links to other sites. We embed content from other platforms. Remember, we were just talking about integrations. Integrations is another word for embedded. So we can embed content, applications, code. There's lots of things that are happening. Your website looks great, but it also has lots of capabilities which introduce vulnerabilities as well. All right, this may be part of a contract. Do you have a person or a company that you have hired as part of a contract that maintains your website or your e-commerce platform, right? If you do, let's take a look at the contract language. What are they responsible for? If there's a breach on your site, what are they accountable for? What are you accountable for? If you're processing, transmitting, storing credit card information and your site gets breached and that information gets out, your customers and your clients are going to come back and they're going to probably, seek benefits from you. And, will you be able to go back to your provider and as a pass-through and seek damages from them? All right, so look at our contracts. Encryption, so end-to-end through the purchasing process. So when we talk about encryption, we're talking about the encryption of the website itself. If we take a look at the URL up in the upper right-hand or upper left-hand corner, we should have an encrypted session when we hit the websites. So we have assurance that nobody can take over the website, from an encryption perspective. So a little left-hand lock. So I'm going to go ahead and share out the screen here. If we take a look, this is that little lock I'm referring to. So are you on a valid site? All right, that valid site is going, if you click on the lock, next time you're looking at your website, all right, you can see here that says the connection is secure. Your information, for example, passwords or credit card numbers is private when sent to this site. So that you need to make sure that that little lock is securing your website in encrypted session so nobody else on the internet can see your browsing session while you're on this site. And if you're on an e-commerce site, we actually performed an evaluation of one of our SBDC clients last year. They sell organic vitamins and some water filtration systems. And when we looked at their e-commerce site that they had hired out, as they're going through the shopping cart itself, the website was secure, like we see here. But when they hit the shopping cart, before they hit checkout, the site went to an unsecure link. And so now everybody can see what's going on in the site, what's in your shopping cart, and then allows you to see what the next button is before you check out. Now, luckily, once they hit the checkout button, it went back to a secure payment site. But we're talking about the chain of custody of all the links that are embedded within your site to make sure that if I click on one link and it takes me to another page on your website, the entire site is secure. That means it's got this little lock, okay? So we're going to talk about some of these other things that you can look at and then start asking questions. All right, encryption for the data itself, the encryption for the information that's going to be input through your website. So it's not going to stay on your website. It's going to be entered into a database that is being hosted or stored either by your web developer or the platform that you have purchased. So it could be GoDaddy, it could be InMotion Hosting, it could be Amazon Web Services, AWS, it could be Microsoft. But you need to understand where that data is going, where it's residing, and whether or not it's encrypted. Is it protected? All right, we'll look at data storage and retention considerations. So in some instances, if you're targeting European Union citizens, so these are countries within Europe that are part of the European Union, which was established in 1950 after World War II, or the UK, even though the UK, United Kingdom, has seceded from the European Union, it still falls under GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation laws. And so there, even an IP address, a cookie, an element that identifies a European Union or UK citizen individually is considered PII. There are social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Snapchat. They're all considered PII under EU and UK law. We don't consider those to be privacy here in the United States, but consider if you're targeting EU citizens, you need to have a better understanding of what you're collecting on UK or EU citizens and how it applies. All right, data storage and retention considerations in the United States. Unless it's based on a specific law, there is no limitations. But if you go back again to the EU under GDPR, you can not store that information, that privacy information or data, any longer than it's needed to process a business function. All right, so once you process a credit card payment, there is no need to have any of that information or data any longer. Who has access and where do they have access to your website information or your e-commerce site information? So your website, e-commerce communication capabilities like Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, they all collect information, they all collect data. In some instances, like Zoom earlier this year, they had a lawsuit filed against them in the Northern California Federal District Court regarding privacy considerations. They were collecting, using, and selling privacy information, not PII, but your name, the registration information that you used to register for Zoom, and selling it without your consent, without notification. And then they had issues with vulnerabilities associated with their software framework, which allowed vulnerabilities to be exploited and additional information and data to get out. Now, they've been fairly prudent about fixing a lot of those problems, but of course, when you're selling information without consent, that raises some eyebrows. All right, so who has access to your information, your data, and where? So you would be surprised how much information is passed between platforms. Remember, I talked about the integration between various platforms. Information gets passed to include your name, your telephone number, your email address, other data elements based on the platform contracts that you've signed up for. All right, and then who's responsible for a breach if your site does get breached? Well, if you've hired a company to maintain your site, again, I go back to it should be part of your contract. Who's responsible for what? Where's the culpability lie in the damages? Who's paying damages? It would be prudent to have somebody scrutinize the contract that you have with your web developer and your e-commerce platforms that you are purchasing as well. We do a lot with what we call professional learning systems or learning management platforms, learning management systems, and we have the ability to collect information, credit card data, sign up for a class. This is while it's a learning management system, it's also considered an e-commerce platform because I can allow people to register, provide me information, and I can collect the payment. All right, common attacks on various sites. Input validation. So as a proprietor, you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, when you go to a site and you ask for someone's information, their name, their telephone number, maybe an email address so that you can provide them more information. those areas where people are putting their information in, you have an expectation, maybe just alphanumeric data input into those areas. You're not looking for special characters. You're not looking for other characters to be input into those areas. Well, if the data element that is collecting that information on your website was not coded or designed properly, an input validation error can provide unauthorized access through the website, through that web application, back to the database that's storing the information that's being collected. Common types that you may have heard are SQL injection or SQL injection or cross-site scripting. All right, so these are types of errors a novice website developer may develop as a vulnerability into your site. Security headers. So here's where I'm going to demonstrate security. So here we're looking at the security headers of your website, the security headers of the pages, and all of the other pages that are part of your site as well. So here we're taking a look at security. So security is a website monitoring and a website firewall and a website backup. All right, so this can be integrated with your hosting provider. So if you're on GoDaddy or InMotion Hosting or Amazon or another platform, you can have your web developer or your web management system embed something like security to provide you information regarding the security on your site. So here we're looking at AmericanExpress.com. All right, so here we can see that there are several vulnerabilities associated with the site here. One is website malware security. The scan failed, so we don't know whether or not. Just go back here and we'll just put in, my website. Scan the website, it comes back with details, tells me what the security posture of my website looks like. Well, good, so it looks like it's a low security risk. All right, what are the attributes associated with my site? So it will actually look for malware, so bad code on my site. No malware was detected. No injected spam was detected. There's no defacements detected. No internal server errors detected. Am I on any of the black site lists? It's going to give me whether or not my site is viewed as untrusted on the internet. All right, let's take a look at these two areas here. Website monitoring, not detected. Website firewall, not detected. All right, so security doesn't know that I am hosted on Amazon Web Services and I actually have website monitoring happening on the back end of my website. I know this to be true because I know my developer, it's written in my contract, and I get to see the analytics associated with people who hit my site. All right, website firewall. I know this to be inaccurate because security can't see it. I know it's being handled on the back end. I've actually looked at the logs associated with this. But again, this is a method in which you can scan your own site or your e-commerce platform, and you can start raising some questions. All right, no website application firewall detected. All right, we saw that up here. All right, let's take a look at the security headers. All right, so Murray Security, it says it's missing security headers for clickjacking protection. All right, it also says that there's 2 pages using JavaScript embedded that is not being protected. So I need to go back and validate that. So content security policy frame, ancestors, none. So ancestor being this page is a subset of another page. It's showing a 404 error. I know what that is because I'm a cyber guy. But these are the types of things you need to be taking a look at and making sure that you have a conversation back with your web developer. Here I can click on more details associated with my website. What's the IP address? I told you I'm being hosted on Amazon Web Services. So you see their IP address, you don't see my IP address. It's being operated off of this type of a server. I am running encryption on transport layer security encryption on my website. All right, this is the server that's being hosted. All right, you can see that I have HTTPS, which provides an encrypted state. If I click over here, I can see all the links associated with my site. So if you look at this and you see something that doesn't look right, some pages here that don't exist on your site, you might want to have your web developer taking a look and seeing why you're seeing things that should not exist on your site. JavaScripts, again, embedded content that enhances the feel of my site. So I've got 2 embedded JavaScripts. There's no iframes included, and I don't have any embedded objects going out to other websites. All right, so I've got a pretty secure site. I don't have a lot going on, and I have a low security rating risk. I've got a couple of things that I'm probably going to want to take a look at and then follow up with my developer. We probably meet about once a month. We take a look at the analytics. We take a look at other things such as we're going to implement a CAPTCHA feature on our website because we have too many robots going by and filling out collection of information on our website. So embedding a CAPTCHA will now allow me to not worry about bots, electronic programs scrolling through the internet, finding sites with data elements, entering data in that I'm not looking for, such as advertising, SEO services, or something else. I'm looking for clients that want to do business with me. I'm not looking to go through trolls that are trolling my site. All right, so let's come back to our presentation. All right, who has access and where? So this is the hosting company. Does the hosting company have multiple data centers? Are they located in other countries? These are things that you need to be aware of, right? And then who's got access to sensitive information or data? Who's responsible for the breach? It should be articulated in your contract. Your clients and your customers are going to come after you. Who are you going after? Is it your web developer? Is it the platform? Again, review your contracts. Common attacks on sites. We just talked about input validation. We talked about security headers. I gave you some examples of some things to look at and some resources that you can use. At the end of the workshop today, we'll actually look at some additional resources that are out there that will provide you some great information on evaluating your site. All right, let's get to the stuff that probably keeps you up at night, right? We're going to look at the various laws that may be applicable to your e-commerce platforms or your e-commerce sites, right? So GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, became effective on May 25th in 2018, seeks to create a harmonized data protection law framework across the European Union, and then aims to give back to data subjects. Data subject is a person who is having information collected about them. So we are data subjects, right? So anytime I write information down, if I check into my chiropractor and I write my name and contact information down because now I have to do that for contact tracing, I'm a data subject. I'm the subject of which the data was collected about. We do this in multiple different ways. All right, so back to data subjects, control of their personal data, whilst imposing strict rules on those hosting and processing this data anywhere in the world. So GDPR is an international law. So GDPR is designed to give individuals better control over their personal data and then establish one single set of data protection rules across Europe. Organizations outside of the EU are subject to this regulation. So the United States, Colorado, El Paso County, Durango, it doesn't matter, all the way down to a person who's running a small business from their kitchen table. It doesn't matter. If you process, transmit, or store and collect and target European Union citizens, you have to comply with this law. 50% of global companies say that they will struggle to meet the new rules set out by Europe unless they make significant changes to how they operate, which may lead to companies to appoint a data protection officer. A DPO is a person who is charged with maintaining protection of PII for an organization, a business. All right, so personal data under GDPR is defined as any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. This includes online identifiers such as your IP address, cookies, if they are capable of being linked back to the data subject. We don't have this much rigor in our laws here in the United States. All right, it also includes indirect information, which may include physical, physiological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, or social identities that can be traced back to a specific individual as well. There is no distinction between personal data about an individual in their private, public, or work roles. All are covered by the regulations. So again, my personal, if I have my own personal website, if I have my own personal login and I post stuff to YouTube, that's considered PII. If I have a Facebook page, that's PII. If I have a LinkedIn page, that's PII, and it's covered under the law. So, questions to consider for yourself. Are you processing, transmitting, and storing information targeting EU citizens? All right, so some questions to consider. Does senior management or the business owner understand the importance of GDPR? Do you know where your data is at? We're coming back to that question. Do you have a process to provide data to individuals who ask? Under GDPR, a European Union citizen has the right to ask you as a proprietor what information you've collected about them. And you have to provide that information in the form of which you collect it at no charge back to the data subject. Do you have a process to delete the data if it's demanded? All right, and a European Union citizen can demand that you delete their information or data. It is considered under the right to be forgotten. All right, so do you understand the consent rules? How is it that you gather consent from a data subject in the EU? You can't just, in the United States, we try and opt out of a collection. In the EU, you have to actually opt in. So you can't just say, well, you're automatically included unless you opt out. You actually have to gather consent and demonstrate consent was gathered. You follow privacy by design and privacy by default principles when designing new systems. So as a small business, you may not be designing new systems, but you may be considering new e-commerce platforms, whether they be collaboration, trying to sell things online, or other types of platforms that collect sensitive information about your users. Right? Do you know which outsourcers have access to the information or data? And do they understand what their roles are? So they would be considered, as a legal term, a data processor on your behalf. They're not allowed to do anything with your information or your data. That needs to be articulated in the agreement, and it needs to be followed up in your service level agreement as to how they're managing your information and your data as well, especially if they're collected on an EU citizen. Are you sure you can detect data breaches? Now, if I go back to the security site that I was showing you, you should have some ability to collect some analytical information on different types of information or data breaches, either on the database server, the pass-through from your website, or from the site itself. All right, do you have a communications plan ready to go after a data breach? Who do you notify? When do you notify them? In the United States, many of the laws for PII breaches articulate you don't have to notify until you've validated that there's a breach. Under the GDPR law in the EU, once you have suspected there may be a breach, you have to report within 24 to 72 hours. If it turns out there's no breach, great, but you still have to report it immediately. after, and then have all your processes and data flows been documented. All right, so where is information? How is it generated? How is it collected? How is it processed, transmitted, or stored, and where does it reside? All of that needs to be documented in your plan. So coming back to the United States under HIPAA, we do have many small businesses that are in the healthcare industry. And online platforms provide capabilities for things like booking, patient data collection, patient management systems. My chiropractor, for example, she has an online patient management system. That is an e-commerce platform. It may be, she may not see it that way initially because she's using it to manage all of her patients, but they also have the ability to link that information to insurance policies to collect payment from insurance providers. There's collection for if the chiropractor orders a different assessment from a physical therapist or suggest a referral to a different medical provider through that system that's also part of that network, and then collects payments. It's still considered an e-commerce platform. So what many of us consider an e-commerce platform, Amazon, Zoom, other sites that allow us to take and collect payment, many of the different platforms we use professionally are also considered e-commerce platforms. All right, so HIPAA breach notification rule. So if you're in the United States, HIPAA breach notification rule 45, Code of Federal Regulations requires HIPAA-covered entities and their business associates to provide notification following a breach of unsecured protected health information. If you consider you go to the hospital, to the emergency room, how many people are providing care for you? Did you have to go to radiology? That's a different medical entity. Did you go and get labs or lab work done? That's a different medical entity. All right, the hospital itself, you may have several different providers that provided care for you, and the only relationship is that they're all co-located at the hospital. But you've got different billing systems, different e-commerce systems that collect your information, and that information is passed through other providers to be able to provide you with care. All right, similar breach notifications provisions implemented and enforced by the Federal Trade Commission applies to vendors of personal health care records and third-party service providers pursuant to Section 13407 of the HITECH Act. Again, HITECH being a part, a subset of the HIPAA law over healthcare, collection of personal healthcare information and electronic personal healthcare information, EPHI. What are the requirements? So the breach is generally impermissible use of disclosure or privacy rule that comprises of the security of or privacy of the protected health information. Impermissible use or disclosure of protected health information is presumed to be a breach unless the covered entity or business associate, as applicable, demonstrate that there is a low probability that the protected health information has been compromised based on a risk assessment of at least the following factors. So these are things considering in your platform, all right, if you're collecting information on patients. All right, the nature and extent of the protected health information involved, including the types of identifiers and the likelihood of re-identification, the unauthorized person who used the protected health information or whom the disclosure was made to, and then whether the protected health information was actually acquired or viewed, and to the extent of which the risk protected health information has been mitigated. Now, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I had been seen by my doctor for a foot issue. So I had to be referred out to a specialist. And when I showed up for the first appointment, the appointment was to collect all of my information. I probably filled out probably about 20 documents, it seemed, collecting all of my medical history, my insurance information, and then I was seen for my appointment. At the next follow-up appointment, I came in, And the person at the front desk said, well, you have to fill out all of this information. We don't have anything on file. Well, I said, well, that seems to be a problem because I filled out all of that information. And if you don't have it and you don't know where it's at, then you have a potential breach of my PII. And so not knowing that I am a HIPAA compliance assessor on behalf of a couple of different state governments, they tried to do the tit for tat back and forth. And then I requested to speak with their patient advocate and their HIPAA officer, compliance officer. And then things got a little sticky. What they ended up finding out is what their business process was is to collect all of the information, to scan it into a PDF file, and then those PDFs get matched into a patient record. They take the hard copies of those documents and then they shred them. So now that they have the PDF documents, they no longer need the paper documents, so they shred those documents. They don't keep physical files anymore of their patient records. What had been determined is the documents got shredded. They were able to demonstrate that through a shred, a defensible destruction shred record for those documents. But what had happened is they took my documents and they provided them, associated them with a different patient. So now you're thinking, oh, well, that's a breach. If somebody who's a physician is looking at my record and I'm not their patient, that should be a breach. That is not necessarily true. So everyone in that healthcare provider's office should be considered a trusted healthcare professional, and you're going to come across information on other patients that may not be your patient. That's not necessarily considered a breach. But it wasn't until I investigated or requested an investigation and asked where my information was that they actually were to understand that my patient data got associated with a different patient. So again, the definition of a breach, you as a provider or you as a provider of services to a healthcare professional or a practice need to take these into consideration. So 3 exceptions, I just talked about one. So the first exception applies to unintentional acquisition, access, or use of protected healthcare information by a workforce member. That's what happened to me. All right, the second exception applies to the inadvertent disclosure of protected healthcare information by a person authorized to access PII. So think of a healthcare administrator. All right, maybe they found a file laying on a table or a desk, and it shouldn't have been laying out. It wasn't protected. So in the care of, in the day-to-day duties of an individual who's authorized to access information, that would not be considered a breach. All right, in both cases here, the information cannot be further used or disclosed in a manner not permitted by the privacy rule. The final exception applies if the covered entity or business associate has a good faith belief that the unauthorized person to whom the impermissible disclosure was made would not have been able to retain the information. So are they going to be able to memorize all of the information associated with my record? All right, so these are exceptions under the breach rule. You got to be asking yourself, well, why are we talking about HIPAA? There are so many different online e-commerce collaboration platforms that are used to manage patient information and data, transmit, process, store to other platforms that allow minimization of interfacing paper versions of information. So we can have communications between insurance companies. If you're retired through the federal government, through the Social Security Administration, through the Small Business Administration, if you're qualifying for loans. There's many different methods and means in which an e-commerce platform not only manages the collection of data, but also passes that data back and forth through other providers and provider networks. It's still considered an e-commerce platform. All right, for California. So California is known for passing some very stringent laws. They passed one that went into effect in January 1st of this year, the data security breach reporting. This is a specific requirement under California Civil Code, which requires businesses or state agencies to notify any California resident whose unencrypted personal information as defined was acquired or reasonably believed to have been acquired by an unauthorized person. All right, any person or business that is required to issue a security breach notification to more than 500 California residents as a result in a single breach of the security breach notification shall electronically submit an example, a copy of that security breach notification, including any PII, to the Attorney General for the state of California. The form is only used by businesses and state and local government agencies, which are required to submit a sample notice if they experience a breach of PII involving more than 500 California residents. So now let's take a look at some of the laws. Who does the law apply to? The California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. Brand new law that has just been enacted. It was passed in 2008, went into effect January 1st of this year. Whom does the law apply to? Businesses that meet the following thresholds are liable for compliance with the California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. If you have an annual gross revenue in excess of $25 million, the law applies. If annually buys, receives for the business, commercial purposes, or sells or shares for commercial purposes alone or in combination the personal information of 50,000 or more consumers, households, or devices. So if you have a subscription, for example, to a database through a service to be able to reach out to consumers and they live in California and there's 50,000 or more, you have to comply. Derives 50% or more of its annual revenues from selling consumers' personal information. Again, would apply. All right, so not as stringent as the Colorado law. Colorado law passed a far-reaching new privacy and cybersecurity law. So it was two different disciplines passed together, protecting privacy and cybersecurity. In 2018, new law was signed by Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, creating the far-reaching new requirements for entities that collect or maintain personal identifiable information of Colorado residents. It should be known prior to passing this law, PII under Colorado law was a collection of information on a Colorado citizen, which had to include their social security number. That has changed. Any unique identifier, such as a driver's license number, a student ID, an insurance ID, if you're government, that EDPI number on the back of your card. Now all of that is consistent with the previous law. It just does not have to include the social security number. All right, these requirements, which will create one of the strictest state-based privacy and data breach laws in the country, went into effect on September 1st, 2018. The Colorado Attorney General's Office led part of the effort to pass the new law, making enforcement a likely priority. The Colorado Springs, the Pikes Peak SBDC, and some of the cyber consultants there actually contributed to some of the legislation of this law. The new law requires organizations to maintain a policy for disposing documents with consumer data and notify Colorado residents of any potential personal information exposure no later than 30 days after discovering a data breach. All right, the 30-day notification window does not provide for any specific exemptions such as other federal laws protecting privacy. Example here would be FERPA, HIPAA. It's the shortest of any state. It maintains a burden on the organization to identify what's happened and then provide that notification. All right, so why are lawyers calling the new Colorado privacy law a landmark? So the new law, officially known as House Bill 181128, takes into effect back in September of 18. A new major change to Colorado's privacy laws. All companies who do business in Colorado and handle personal identifiable information are required to comply. There is no exemption for small business. This is a very unusual situation. So if I go back here, most small businesses in Colorado are not going to meet the requirements for CCPA. But here in Colorado, you could be a small business working out of your basement, and you have to comply with the new Colorado law. Businesses must implement and maintain reasonable security measures and protect documents containing PII, both on paper and electronically. They must contractually require third parties that they share with this data, such as cloud service providers and other vendors, to implement those same reasonably secure measures, and they must implement a written policy covering the disposal of documents containing PII. Not just documents, but any electronic record as well that holds PII. In addition, the definition of PII in this law is extremely broad. Finally, businesses who have a data breach must notify parties affected within 30 days with no extensions. This is the toughest notification provision in the country. The number 2 item here, the basic requirements of the law. Remember I talked about the contracts that you have with your e-commerce platforms? Colorado mandates this by law. So if you're doing business with a web developer or a company and they tell you that they can't do this, they have to. They're required to do it by law. And so this is the heavy hammer that you use to have that conversation with your e-commerce platform development folks. What is the definition of reasonable? This is one of the downsides that I don't like about laws is conveniently the law doesn't define this, but they do say that it should be commensurate with risk, right? Ultimately, if the Attorney General asks, you need to be able to convince, this is the previous Attorney General, what you've done is reasonable. In our opinion, that reasonable means best practices, and those have become pretty clear for cybersecurity. All right, the previous Attorney General was very involved in the crafting of the bill, so assume that she had a strong opinion of what considered is reasonable. So if you want to know what's reasonable, talk to an SBDC cyber consultant or a legal a professional that's part of the SBDC network as well. All right, so what are the consequences for noncompliance? The Attorney General can sue for noncompliance and also recover damages for Colorado residents. More significantly, the Attorney General can file criminal charges if requested in any local district attorney or the governor's office. So if you're not doing due diligence and you are just flying by the seat of your pants and no interest or no intent, criminal charges may be filed against you as well. This is very similar to GDPR. All right, what are the key components of a company's reasonable security program? Again, thinking in terms of best practices, some of the key components of a reasonable security program include creating and implementing a written information security program. It's required by the law anyway. Perform a risk assessment annually. It should be done on your systems, anything that you collect, process, transmit, or store, even if somebody else is maintaining it for you. Implement an ongoing employee training, encrypt data at rest. So that's data that you may be requiring to hold on to, but you're really not using anymore. You want to encrypt that so nobody can get unauthorized access to it. Implement a set of cyber security policies and procedures. There's lots of different frameworks out there that allows you to be able to do this, including NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. Create a disaster recovery program. Implement an incident response program. Create a data retention and disposal policy, commensurate with the laws that you have to apply to. and then implement a third-party vendor risk management program. Again, your information cybersecurity requirements under the new cybersecurity law passed in September of 2018 mandate all of these as reasonable for an organization or a small business to be able to manage the program effectively. And have an assessment, have somebody from an SBDC, a cyber consultant, come in and advise you where your gaps are. All right, so let's take a look at some of the tools that are available out there. So these are free assessment tools. URLscan.io, based out of Germany, will do a deep analysis of your entire website. Tells you where all of your directs are, your redirects are, what type of analytics that you're using. I actually have this already up, so we'll take a look. URL and website scanner. Let's go ahead and put Murray Security Services here again. We'll do a public scan. It's asking me to identify that I'm a human, so we'll do that. So now it does a scan on my site, and then it's going to give me all kinds of different information that would be useful for someone to be able to determine whether or not there are any vulnerabilities or any other strange things that are going on at the site that need to be evaluated. All right, so the IP address goes back to Amazon.com. I'm using Google Analytics. Okay, there were 17 requests to my site. There were no ad blocks because I don't have embedded advertising. I had 0 malicious hits on my site. I am 100% encrypted on my site. It showed me a different version of an IP address. It hit 4 different domains, 4 different subdomains, 4 different IP addresses because Amazon doesn't just have one. I'm showed up in Germany for Google Analytics, so 2 countries in the United States. I'm running 5 cookies. All right, detected technologies from my website. It actually gives me a safe picture to look at for the website without actually interacting with the website. So if you get a phishing email and you think that the link is taking to a site that may be suspicious, plug the website into the IO scan. You can visualize, you can see a visual representation with the site without clicking on any of the links. All right, in here, so it sees that I have, my developer uses Ruby as a programming language. All right, NGINX for web servers, Ruby on Rails for part of my Amazon Web Services web framework. It's using Font Awesome for some of the fonts that I have, font scripts. It's using Google Analytics. All right, and then it uses MouseFlow Analytics. All right, so these were all detected on my site. All right, how many HTTP requests came from my site to various applications or redirects? All right, how many links do I have into my site? Well, I've got a link to my website developer organization. I've got one to this Colorado Springs Chamber because we have a relationship. All right, I have one to an admin account for Murray Security Services for my admin folks to maintain the site. What is it doing? All right, so I can see what URLs are going to what locations. All right, there's a lot of different things that you can gain if you have this technical knowledge. However, the thing that you are really looking for is under the summary, how does it look? Does it look like it's a safe site? All right, and then ask certain questions. Here over detected technologies, you're going to have a better understanding of what's collecting information on the people who hit your website or your e-commerce platform. All right, another tool that you see, Joe Security, an in-depth analysis for malware, previously not possible. So lots of additional capabilities to do a deep scan analysis of your platforms, all right, if that's allowed. And then, of course, I showed you the Securi, SECURI site. You go back to the home page, you put in your own page to be scanned, and it looks at the various layers of your site, your platforms, okay? So different resources here. All right, this will allow you to ask some additional questions that may make your developer uncomfortable. All right, so what can you do now? All right, tools to consider, questions to ask your website developer. Talk to your developer. So for your e-commerce platform, if you have a contractual arrangement, so you're paying $10,000 a year for this platform, it's being hosted on the e-commerce platform site. How do they comply with various laws? PCI DSS, who processes your payments on the site, and where are they processed? You probably have a contractual agreement with that vendor, and you're not doing it directly. You have a third-party provider. Information is being collected. If you're doing business on your business, say a chiropractor or dentist office, and you're using an online patient management system, that is considered an e-commerce platform. You're doing it online. You're collecting, processing, transmitting, storing information on your patients. All right. Does it qualify for PHI or EPHI? All right. Electronic personal health care information. All right. Are you targeting California citizens? Do you meet the demographics for the 3 different instances that I demonstrated earlier? All right. What are your obligations under California law? I talked about the Colorado 18-1128. Are they aware of their requirements as your developer, all right, as your e-commerce platform? They can't say that, well, we're located in the EU, we're located in India, we don't have to comply. They have to comply if they're providing you a service, all right? Are they built into the site? GDPR, are you targeting EU or UK citizens? Notifications for consent, collection, opt-out clauses, even for cookies and analytics. The notifications have to be made when they hit your landing page, and they have to have a click-through. Scan your site using free tool like urlscan.io, the Securi or Joe Sandbox. There's others, or just have a third party. Request a professional assessment from an independent or trusted third party. In some instances, some of the laws that I showed you, this is required by law at least annually. Read the collection and privacy policies from the platforms that you use, and then consult an SBDC consultant to assist you. You know, a lot of this information can become overwhelming, but this is why small business development centers exist. They have various disciplines between accounting and marketing and business plan management, disaster recovery, business continuity, cybersecurity, the list goes on and on. Cybersecurity or your SBD's consultants are here to offer you capabilities to be able to navigate these waters efficiently. All right, so what can you do as a small business? Categorize and classify your information. Develop an information and data classification scheme. So how do you protect confidential information? All right, how do you classify it? Where is it stored? Do an inventory. Categorize and classify your systems. Even if you have them on a contract, you don't maintain them, you should know what information is being processed, transmitted, or stored, either in the cloud, on your e-commerce platforms, or on your systems within your own business. Align the scheme from your classified information to the systems that you use to collect, process, transmit, and store that sensitive information as well. Perform an inventory, see what laws apply to your business processes, develop a plan, and then determine what applies to your organization. And then, as always, please talk to an SBDC consultant, make an appointment, and get some assistance. All right, so we're into that portion of the presentation where we open it up for questions. So I'll pass it back to our folks over at SBDC. Do we have any questions coming in?
Yes, we do. So I'll just read those off to you, Sean.
Okay.
Is there a difference in e-commerce platforms like WooCommerce or Shopify as to security? Well, hold on, let me reread that. Is there a difference in e-commerce platforms as to like security measures?
Yeah, so one of the things that just came up, Shopify is a great example, right? So we take a look at we'll take a look at Shop Clues, for example. This is one of the sites that we were looking at. So an e-commerce platform, most people are considering e-commerce platform as Amazon. Here's one, Shop Clues, that is based on a platform that are developed by a couple of Russian companies. All right, there is no distinguishment on an e-commerce platform other than what is the information that you're collecting. If you have people coming to your platform to purchase products, to sign up for services, to collect registration information for a distant relationship, that is considered under law an e-commerce site. Anything that collects your personal information, has the ability to collect payment information, store any of that information, it's considered e-commerce. And this is why I like to go back to people that are practicing in medicine or practicing in law, tax accountants. Accountants, sometimes they drive me nuts because they forget their online platform that they're using, Intuit, for example. That is an e-commerce platform. Because you're collecting information, you're inputting information, you have the ability to process, collect, transmit, and store, and you have the ability to provide banking information to do direct deposits. It's considered an e-commerce platform as well.
Thank you. Can you provide or show us where there may be information on how much time and money is involved in assuring your business is adhering to cybersecurity requirements?
So this is where I always advise, let's come back, have a discussion with an SBDC consultant. Don't try and go it alone. One of the problems that we see in our industry is when a small business cares enough to start looking at these processes, it seems overwhelming. You know, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Start by consulting with somebody that you can trust. You know, SBDC, the Better Business Bureau, your chambers, if they have a cyber element embedded, you're paying for these services if you're members of these organizations anyway. So go a trusted route. We had a client a couple years ago that came to us and said, look, we were evaluating our cybersecurity requirements and we asked this company what it would take to get where we need to. And the quote came in at $45,000. Does this seem reasonable to you? And so they actually had their main IT person in the meeting. And so I said, Jen, how many computer systems do you have? 6 laptops. How many printers do you have? 1 shared printer. And we connect through our Comcast Xfinity. So $45,000, and they're not processing, transmitting, or storing any personal identifiable information, maybe some intellectual property, but $45,000 was unreasonable. In small businesses especially are vulnerable to being taken advantage of because you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what is reasonable. So I would say that depending on the size of your business, the type of business you are, the industry you're in, that could be somewhat expensive or it could be very reasonable. There's lots of resources that are out there for you to be able to, number one, determine where you're at and then make a plan going forward. Nobody's going to expect any business to be 100% compliant at the day after a law is passed. But you should have a plan. There's lots of free resources out there. as well. The NIST risk management framework is an ability to identify all your plans, your policies, your procedures, identify your critical information, your critical data, and then allows you to start making a plan to become compliant.
Thank you. And I just want to point out real quick, because we did have a question, you do not have to be in the Pikes Peak region to tap into the cybersecurity consulting resources. We're a state network, so we can connect you to consultants across the state.
Absolutely.
Yes. So another question, is there a threshold where potential risk outweighs the benefit of e-commerce?
That's a great question. So, that's such a great business perspective. Everything we do is based on some level of risk that we're willing to accept in our day-to-day business activities. I teach classes on governance, risk, and compliance for small businesses, and it really is the balancing of risk associated with your business processes. And so what's reasonable, what's affordable, and then what risk are you willing to take? So you either accept risk, you mitigate it by applying controls, resources to reduce it to an acceptable level so you're comfortable and you're not staying up at night. You avoid the risk altogether because the risk is so significant you don't want to deal with the risk, or you transfer a share. This is where we have insurance policies. Now, you can't buy cyber insurance anymore without them having a clause that says you're going to demonstrate you're doing things like antivirus and phishing and training and having a policy. But yeah, balancing risk with the needs of the business. Only the business owner can determine what their level of risk is, what's their risk tolerance, the maximum amount of risk they're willing to take to achieve their long-term objectives. Risk appetite is between 0%. It's that range to risk tolerance. But that can go up and down based on the information that we get that helps us manage our risk.
Awesome, thank you. And then one last question, can you recommend any developers?
So we don't do that through the SBDC network. Not on our workshops anyway. It would be best to have a discussion with an SBDC consultant, and then we could advise different types of resources that are out there. I've provided some that are a getting start. There are paid capabilities that are out there as well, but this is going back to SBDCs, your Better Business Bureau, and your chambers. These are trusted entities that businesses trust in. You pay for their experience, you pay for their services, not in all instances, but the idea is these are trusted resources for you to be able to be advised on. So I would say go back to your SBDC or your Better Business Bureau, or your chamber if you have those resources available to you.
Awesome, thank you.
Sean, can I ask an add-on to that? Does the cyber program have even just a list of 5 things you should make sure your developer is doing, or 5 questions you absolutely have to ask a developer, or you know what I mean, like a short list, just so that if you're interviewing a developer to do your site, you know what to ask or what to make sure is included, or just really critical things?
These are the things right here.
Okay,
that we put on
the
there.
ones we talked about. Okay, so
Yeah,
we can use that slide.
Yeah, absolutely, and so we'll provide a PDF so that you can provide this out to your audience as well. But yeah, this can be a tense conversation between your developer, especially if they're independent. They may not be doing everything. Your site may look great, but it may not be functional on the cybersecurity side. And these are some of the things that you should ask. But then again, if you start here and then you get worried, come in and talk to one of us at any of the SBDCs.
Awesome, thank you. That's all the questions we have currently, but if anyone thinks of anything else after the webinar, feel free to shoot that to us and we can connect you to Sean or get the answer for you and get it back to you. But Mary, I will pass it off to you and let you close it down.
Sean, did you want to mention the cybersecurity event that's coming?
Yes, actually, so the Pikes Peak region has its third annual cyber symposium that's coming up on Thursday. It's free registration. If you would like, let me come right out to the site. I'll pull this down off to the side. All right, so Pikes Peak SBDC Cyber Summit. All right, so again, this is Thursday. Please come out to the Pikes Peak SBDC. Everything cyber that you want to consider for your business, we're going to be talking about it all day. Everything from government, so cybersecurity maturity model, manufacturing's edge. We'll actually have the top guru from the Small Business Administration. I'll be doing a fireside chat with him and his team. It's going to be a great venue. Please come on out here. Here's some of our folks. Daniel Elliott is coming back as our keynote speaker. You can see some of the additional things that we've got going on. We've got basic, advanced, and general topics that'll be discussed. So we're looking at NIST 171 updates. There's a cybersecurity simplified that Rodney does a great job. What are the simple things that businesses need to understand about their business, especially when 80% of your processes are automated? All right, we'll have a breakout session. We'll talk about cybersecurity scams and the impact on small business after COVID. Jonathan Liebert, that's a partnership with he's the director of the Better Business Bureau for Southern Colorado. Lots of different things we're going to be discussing in an all-day event with the Pikes Peak SBDC. It's our annual cybersecurity summit for small business. We would love for you to register, and we would love to see you there. Thanks for providing that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to, we'll get the word out. We'll send out another post to all of our folks down here and share it with some of our partners, the chambers and the different organizations you spoke about earlier. So thanks for doing that. It's a great program for the state of Colorado and small businesses. So yeah, and it's free. So, and you don't have to travel to Colorado Springs to participate this year. This is the year to participate if you haven't done it before. So awesome. And thank you so much for spending this hour with us. And thanks to Ekta for letting us tap into her resources. The work that you guys are doing is really important. And I've said it before, I know a lot of people have a little bit of ostriching around this topic, I call it. You cannot just stick your head in the sand and hope that something bad won't happen. You really do need to educate yourself and understand what's required of you, what the risks are, how do you mitigate those risks. And again, if that's overwhelming, just like everything in business, you decide what you want to do, and then you find ways to get help and outsource the stuff that you need help with. And that's where SBDC comes in. So let us help you. Let us connect you to resources, and you can do this. So learn more about cybersecurity and make sure that you're compliant where you need to be compliant. And so thanks everyone for joining us today. Hannah, do we need to add anything? I will say next Tuesday, we're going to be moving into SEO. No, next Tuesday, we're talking about platforms. So we will actually start looking at the different options that you have for building your e-commerce platform. So thank you again, Hannah. Any final words from you?
Nope, I think it's been covered.
All right. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for being here with us today. And thanks, Sean, for sharing so much information with us. This presentation will be available to you, as will some resources in our resource library. So reach out to us, or we'll send it out to everybody who was here today. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah,
Bye,
thank
everybody.
you.